When Worlds Collide is the grandfather of every disaster movie ever made, a film about humanity's last desperate shot at survival before total extinction. But even after more than 70 years, this film is still hiding secrets. Did you know the final shot of this film is actually an unfinished painting that was supposed to be replaced with something more realistic? Or that decades later, this film's exact premise fueled a real doomsday scare that terrified millions of people? Today, we're uncovering 14 hidden truths about When Worlds Collide 1951, including shocking Easter eggs that reveal a secret connection to the Star Trek and the time machine. Number 1. The ending was explained in the novel. In the version released in theaters, the ending begins after the space ark runs out of fuel and crash lands in a deep snowfield on Zyra. As pilot David Randall and Joyce Hendren step onto the planet, clearly artificial structures can be seen on both the left and right sides of the distant landscape. They resemble buildings that could not possibly have been constructed by the newly arrived survivors. Yet the film offers no explanation for them, and none of the characters react to their presence. The ending presents Zyra as an untouched paradise and a fresh start for humanity. But those structures suggest that another civilization had already lived there. However, the pyramid-like structures are explained more clearly in the novel's sequel, After Worlds Collide. In the novel, the survivors explore the planet and discover the remains of a vanished alien civilization. They find 5 enormous domed cities containing roads, vehicles, aircraft, and advanced machinery. After a linguist deciphers the written records left behind by the alien civilization, the survivors learn that its population had fallen from around 1 billion to roughly 10 million because people largely stopped having children after discovering that their planet would be torn away from its sun. George Pal considered adapting After Worlds Collide as a sequel, but the box office failure of his later film, Conquest of Space, ended any realistic chance of the project being made. Number 2. This film is hidden inside Star Trek. In 1982, Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan was released and widely considered the best of the Star Trek movies. Deep in that film, there's a sequence set in the Genesis Cave, an artificial world grown inside an asteroid by a device that can create life on dead planets. Now freeze that scene and look closely at the cargo containers stacked in the cave. 2 of them carry labels, and they read Boldest and Zyra. Those are the exact names of the rogue star and the escape planet from When Worlds Collide. It's a deliberate Easter egg, a quiet wink from the Star Trek crew back to the 1951 classic, and a fitting one, because both stories chase the same dream, building a brand new world to replace one that's been lost. 30 years apart, the 2 films are secretly linked by a couple of crates sitting in the background. Number 3. The ending was never meant to look like this. Speaking of those artificial buildings in the ending, there is another reason they look so strange. The entire final shot was never meant to appear on screen in that form. What theatrical audiences actually saw was a flat, visibly painted concept image, with the camera panning across the artwork to create a slight illusion of movement and depth. George Pal had originally planned a more convincing composite built around a 3-dimensional miniature, a small physical model of the Ark and its pyramid-like structures made to appear full-sized, then blended with matte-painted scenery for the distant landscape. Chesley Bonestell, the movie's technical advisor and one of the most famous space artists of his day, had created the color concept painting as a temporary stand-in while the completed effect was still being prepared. But after Destination Moon won an Academy Award for its special effects, Paramount hurried When Worlds Collide toward release in hopes of benefiting from the earlier film's success. With no time to construct the miniature, Pal placed Bonestell's concept painting into the preview version and asked for another $5,000 to replace it afterward. The preview audience responded enthusiastically and apparently raised no complaints about the unfinished shot. So Paramount refused the additional money and released the film with the temporary painting still in place. Number 4. A cartoon bird is hidden in this movie. George Pal had a personal ritual. In nearly every film he made, he hid a tiny appearance by Woody Woodpecker, the cartoon character. It was a private thank you to animator Walter Lantz, who created Woody and who had helped Pal get his American citizenship after Pal emigrated from Hungary. Because it was a tribute and not a joke, Pal tucked the bird in where you'd never think to look. In the War of the Worlds, Woody can be seen high in a treetop at the center of the frame as the first Martian meteorite ship streaks across the sky near the beginning of the film. In When Worlds Collide, you have to catch it in the airport scene near the beginning, when the pilot Randall first arrives. You can spot Woody on a ball and on a man's scarf in that sequence. Pal kept this good luck tradition going across his entire career, from Destination Moon in 1950 all the way to Doc Savage in 1975. A tiny cartoon bird became his signature, a hidden thank you to a friend buried in every disaster and space epic he ever made. Number 5. The moon's death was too expensive to film. In the film, Zyra's close pass causes enormous earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tsunamis across Earth. But nothing is shown happening to the moon. Its fate is never even mentioned, as the movie keeps its attention on the destruction unfolding across Earth and the desperate attempt to launch the space ark. But the novel clearly explains what happened to the moon. In the novel, Bellis is known as Bronson Alpha, while Zyra is known as Bronson Beta. After the two make their first close pass by Earth, the survivors notice that the moon has vanished from the night sky. Bronson Alpha clips one side of the moon instead of crashing directly into its center, shattering it into fragments. Some of those fragments may have merged with Bronson Alpha, while others could have scattered into space or entered separate orbits around the sun. It would have been an unforgettable image on screen. But George Pal had envisioned a more elaborate production than the film's limited budget allowed, so the moon's destruction was omitted entirely. Pal was forced to scale down several of his more ambitious ideas, and the destruction of the moon became one of the novel's greatest spectacles that never made it into the finished movie. Number 6. A real Doomsday cult believes this plot. The whole engine of When Worlds Collide is simple. A rogue planet is racing toward Earth. A few scientists sound the alarm, and the authorities laugh them off, while newspapers dismiss it as a hoax. It's fiction. Except decades later, a very real conspiracy theory took that exact shape. Starting in the 1990s and flaring up again around 2012 and 2017, believers claimed that a hidden planet called Nibiru, or Planet X, was swinging in toward Earth on a collision course. They said its gravity would trigger monster earthquakes and giant tidal waves, and that world governments were covering the whole thing up. The idea spread across millions of websites. It got serious enough that NASA had to step in. Scientist David Morrison publicly debunked it, stating flatly that there was no credible evidence Nibiru existed. But the messages he received showed that the panic had real consequences, leaving some people severely distressed rather than merely entertained by an internet rumor. The rumor exploded after believers connected Nibiru to the widely publicized 2012 Mayan calendar apocalypse, while books, websites, and YouTube videos carried the claim to a massive audience. A 1951 movie plot scientists ignored, a killer planet inbound, a global cover-up, had somehow escaped the screen and become something people genuinely feared. Number 7. This volcano erupted in 3 different movies. When Worlds Collide won its Academy Award for those miniature effects, and one standout shot showed a volcano erupting, the whole side of the mountain collapsed outward in a wave of destruction. It was expensive, painstaking work. Effects that good and that costly were far too valuable to use only once. So rather than pay to create another elaborate eruption, George Pal preserved the completed footage and reused it whenever one of his later films needed a similar disaster scene. That exact volcano shot turns up again in Pal's The Time Machine from 1960 and Atlantis, The Lost Continent from 1961. The film also includes a scene of frightened people gathered inside a country store, listening to disaster reports on the radio, and this footage was later reused in The War of the Worlds. So if a destruction scene in a later Pal film ever struck you as oddly familiar, there's a good reason for it. You'd already seen it years earlier in When Worlds Collide. Number 8. The movie's title is scientifically wrong. Throughout the film, the object hurtling toward Earth, Bellis, is called a star, with a smaller planet, Zyra, riding along beside it. But in the original novel, the two intruders were both rogue planets, not a star at all. The filmmakers made the swap because a star sounded bigger and scarier. The trouble is that this change breaks science. A star is a massive, self-luminous sphere of hot gas or plasma, held together by gravity. If a whole star were bearing down on Earth, its heat would have scorched the planet to ash long before any collision, and there'd be no dramatic final approach, no arc launch, no story left to tell. It also makes the title itself inaccurate. When Worlds Collide promises worlds, meaning planets, smashing together, and the poster even screamed, "Planets destroy Earth." Yet by the film's own logic, it's a star doing the destroying, not a world. Fans and critics have poked at this contradiction for decades. The movie traded scientific sense for a bigger scare, and the mistake is baked right into the name on the marquee. Number 9. The censors erased the novel's boldest idea. The novel came out in 1933, and it wasn't afraid to ask an uncomfortable question. If only a few dozen humans survive to rebuild the entire species, does old-fashioned one-man, one-woman marriage still make sense? In the book, Eve Hendren, the character who became Joyce in the film, considers forming a relationship with both Tony Drake and Dave Ransdell, instead of being forced to choose between them. The novel openly explores the possibility of polyandry, in which one woman has more than one partner because so few humans remain alive. That was never going to survive Hollywood. In 1951, films were bound by the Hays Production Code, the strict industry rulebook that policed morality on screen, and it would not permit any sympathetic portrayal of polyandry. So the filmmakers replaced the idea with a tidy, conventional love triangle, neatly resolved when Drake bows out. A story that once dared to question society's rules became a much safer, more traditional tale, all to satisfy the censors. Number 10. The first movie Superman hides in the crowd. As Earth's final days close in, the film shows society breaking apart, with desperate mobs rioting through the streets. In one of those crowd scenes, a rioter hauls in a load of guns. That extra, uncredited, and easy to miss is Kirk Allen. A few years earlier, Allen had been the very first actor ever to play Superman on screen, starring in the Columbia movie serials of 1948 and 1950. But playing Superman had typecast him so hard that his career stalled out, and Hollywood stopped offering him substantial roles. With meaningful opportunities drying up, he was left accepting tiny, uncredited appearances like this one simply to keep working. So there he is, the original screen Superman, reduced to an anonymous face in a panicking mob, uncredited in a film about the end of the world. It's a quietly sad little footnote. Number 11. You've heard this film's name in a song. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, the 1975 cult musical famous for its audience participation screenings, begins with a musical performance called Science Fiction/Double Feature. The song is a loving roll call of classic science fiction movies, repeatedly mentioning film titles alongside the actors, characters, or filmmakers associated with them. Among those references is a direct reference to When Worlds Collide. The song directly mentions the film in the lyric, "Gave him the runes, and passing them used lots of skills. But when worlds collide," said George Pal to his bride, "I'm gonna give you some terrible thrills." Since the song plays during the film's opening credits, generations of Rocky Horror viewers have heard the name When Worlds Collide, even if they have never watched or heard of the original 1951 film. Number 12. A Star Wars legend finished Pal's dream. Back in the 1950s, George Pal claimed that the film's effects were so powerful that audiences wouldn't just hear the sound, they would physically feel its vibrations throughout their bodies. It was a bold promotional promise, but the sound technology available in theaters at the time simply couldn't deliver that kind of experience. Now fast forward to 2023. At the TCM Classic Film Festival, Ben Burtt, the legendary sound designer behind Star Wars and WALL-E, the man who created the beeps of R2-D2 and the hum of the lightsaber, appeared before the audience to introduce and host a special screening of When Worlds Collide. Burtt had first watched the film as a terrified child and was so shaken by its earthquake sequence that he later hid under the bathroom sink. This time, he came prepared to make good on Pal's old promise. Burt enhanced the screening's sound presentation by connecting the original soundtrack to 14 powerful subwoofers with a combined 2,000 watts of amplification, producing low-frequency vibrations strong enough to shake the theater. Standing before the crowd, he announced that tonight they would finally fulfill George Pal's dream. Number 13, this movie secretly became a 90s blockbuster. In the late 1970s, two big Hollywood producers, Richard Zanuck and David Brown, set out to remake When Worlds Collide. They even lined up a screenplay by Anthony Burgess, the author of A Clockwork Orange. But the remake bounced around for years without ever getting made. By 1995, the long-stalled project had reached Steven Spielberg, who was already developing a similar end-of-the-world film for his newly established DreamWorks studio. Spielberg's project was based on Arthur C. Clarke's 1993 novel, The Hammer of God, about an asteroid on a collision course with Earth. Rather than compete, the two ideas were merged into one. That combined project became Deep Impact, the 1998 blockbuster about a comet on a collision course with our planet, with Spielberg on board as executive producer. The finished film drifted so far from its sources that neither the old movie nor the Clarke novel got a screen credit. But the DNA is right there. One of the biggest disaster hits of the 1990s was, at its very root, a grandchild of When Worlds Collide. Number 14. The studio rushed it out half-finished. George Pal imagined When Worlds Collide as a big-budget effects spectacle, a serious showcase. But the studio, Paramount, had other ideas. They'd just watched the space film Destination Moon become a surprise hit, and they wanted to ride that wave fast. So they pushed Pal to shoot quickly and get the movie into theaters before the effects were truly ready. The live-action filming took just 27 days. The visual effects work took roughly 54 days, twice as long as the live-action shoot. The whole film was made for only around $936,000. That rush left its fingerprints all over the finished product, most famously in that unfinished Bonestel sketch standing in for the final shot. Paramount got their quick cash in, but Pal was forced to release a version with visible seams. And yet it still won the Academy Award for Visual Effects, which tells you just how good the man was, even when the studio wouldn't give him the time to finish. When Worlds Collide wasn't just a disaster movie. It was the first film to ask a question that still haunts us. If we knew the end was coming, could we actually work together to survive it? 75 years later, we're still not sure of the answer. What do you think? Could humanity pull it off? Or would we tear ourselves apart before the rocket ever launched? If this one made you think, leave a comment, hit subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.